Welcome back here to Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about how women are able to always bounce back, to hit the reset button. And for analysis, we'll be dealing with the film Jolene. This was Jessica Chastain's breakout role. Now, some will say, oh, it's based on a short story written by a Care Bear, so it's just propaganda. Well, in fact, I've met quite a few women that are inferior to her in looks and have more baggage, but they've been able to pull off this grift with a variety of men. So I think it is quite salient in some manner. You might liken the film to Forrest Gump, Jenny's side of the story, because there are some parallels. She's born in an abusive household in the South, obviously. She gets married as a teenager to Mickey, a nice guy who just works a regular job, lives with his aunt and uncle. It's implied that his mom killed herself, and he just wants a normie existence. He is so passionately obsessed with Jolene, and he gives it to her missionary style, lasts a very impressive 30 seconds. Then he makes the cardinal error of crying himself to sleep in her arms. Now, gentlemen, if you ever do this, a woman says, be vulnerable, show emotion, you exhibit that in her presence, and she's going to disrespect you. She might welcome it at the time, but down the road, it will be the knife used to stab you in the back. She also says, Jolene, well, the problem is he just don't have no ambition for me. And that's kind of true. He wants too simple of a life, and she's not going to settle for it. As Mickey heads off to work one day, his uncle enters the picture. And this guy you might compare to Richard Blooper if you were to shave the beard, glue it to his head, and remove the glasses. He's middle-aged, he's a red pill coper, he's coloring his locks so that he appears young, and he wants to reclaim his youth because he has a wife who simply will not touch him in a sexual manner. But he stumbles across Jolene in her booty shorts, gyrating as she washes the kitchen floor to music, and he's just overcome with tradcon passion, a platonic need to hold her hand, to sing her love melodies, and never allow a sinful thought to cross his mind. So naturally, they start banging. And this is a perfect setup. He falls in love. He knows she's not 18 yet because you can do that in the South. But once she is, he's going to whisk her off like some not quite eggs mix, and they're going to buy a house. They'll be in love forever. So many middle-aged guys fall into this trap in the West when they start going after teenage girls, which is often because the teenage girls are the ones who start that interaction and it jacks them over. Now, this is pre-social media, and indeed, a lot of boomers were smashing teenagers when they were in their 20s. This is something you never hear about. If you press your parents enough, they'll probably talk about that. Don't ask me how I know, but they're all moralistic now, but that's what they were doing when they were younger, guaranteed. It used to be fairly mainstream. I think now it's more common amongst Latinos just because there's still that old world mentality. But what they don't account for in their whole plot here is the wife discovering it. She walks in on them, and so Mickey also discovers he's been betrayed. He goes to a bridge, chucks himself off it. Jolene doesn't really care because he's not the man for her. And this dude, the uncle, ends up getting charged and sent to prison. Jolene's response is to be like, well, I really couldn't care less because it's about my life now. And that's 100% true. Once they're done and they screw the guy over and he's on the registry or whatever, or even if they were of age, they'll claim that he was trying to manipulate or groom them, despite the fact that they said at the time they like older guys. I mean, they're just the masters of never taking responsibility for their actions. So, yeah, he's in prison. She actually makes the remark, and then I realized that his hair's not actually dark, it's gray. So that's another black pill if you date a younger chick. They will start pointing out that, oh, you're old or whatever, once they have reason to get rid of you. So this dude fell into the trap, and unfortunately, his character at least has to suffer the consequences. Jolene herself is sentenced to a term in a female nut house, and there she meets this butch lesbo nurse slash guard who says that man was disgusting. He took advantage of you're innocent, you're underage, and naturally, this woman does the exact same thing. She tries to seduce Jolene, or Jolene permits herself to be taken either way, because she has an ulterior motive, which is to fly the coop, escape the hen house, and she's successful. Once The butch lesbian returns to work. She runs away from that lady's home. But you say, yeah, she's young. She has no skill set, no money. How's she going to make it? Well, she just goes up to long haul truckers and says, and Wendy has lonely eyes, if you get the reference. So everything's taken care of. And eventually she crash lands to work at a Sonic restaurant. Here she meets Rupert Friend, the bad boy tattoo artist slash drug dealer, and they take up together. Although eventually she discovers that he's previously married with a kid and has to make a choice, so she trashes his tattoo parlor and heads off to seek her fortune as a stripper. In this capacity, she meets Carlo Scusi Babadabupi, an Italian mobster, and he introduces her to the fine life. So now she's going for the older guy again, but he's got resources. He can wine and dine her. This all goes fine until she discovers him shot to death, and I guess they were trying to get to her as well, but she escapes in the nick of time, once more pressing the reset button. Her next move is to snag a job as a server at some country club, where she meets a rich Chad Light and he begins to pursue her aggressively. They get married, but for some reason he's also a tradcon, so he waits until wedding night. Then he sees she has a racy tramp stamp and he gets pissed off, says, how many men have you been with? She's like, it don't matter. I love you. Stop being insecure. So he pulls this absolutely red pill style response and he bangs her up the wee hee without any condom. So because of this, and because despite using that particular USB port, she still has a baby, and then he starts like slapping her around, being a little masculine and alpha male. And his parents figure out that she's been previously married, so basically she's a bigamist, commits fraud, and she loses her kid, but then she can walk off into the sunset and say she's going to be an actress now. Realistically, in the modern world, the Chad Light probably wouldn't have dumped her because he doesn't have other options, or at least in most cases, given how bad the market is. I guess he could try to Southeast Asia Max, but we all know what that's about. Actually, I know a guy, he makes it rain. He earns quite a great deal of money, works a lot, but he just told me he's getting into a relationship with a girl who has 3 children under the age of 4. Run that through your mind for a second. I mean, I've seen some bad cases before, like this Latino guy that wifed up this white hoe. She like had kids with multiple different men, and he had a good job. He was a military veteran. Never understood that one. It didn't even come off as a simp, his vibes. But a lot of guys will do this. And you ask, why precisely? Well, I have a quote for you from Dostoevsky that I think summarizes quite well how men tend to behave around women, no matter how moralistic they purport to be. He was that sort of jealous man who, in the absence of the beloved woman, at once invents all sorts of awful fantasies of what may be happening to her and how she may be betraying him. But when shaken, heartbroken, convinced of her faithlessness, he runs back to her. At the first glance at her face, her gay, laughing, affectionate face, he revives at once, lays aside all suspicion, and with joyful shame abuses himself for his jealousy. This is so true. The number of guys I know who have forgiven women that cuck them or have taken chicks that have such a storied torrential dating history and will always make up these excuses. In a way, you see it online, and I'm not saying I disagree with them, but like a lot of these manosphere people, they'll talk about how, oh, she's being banged out every weekend. And then the moment that chick gives them the time of day, oh, it's rainbows and sunshine. Like all that stuff went out the window. So it's a very interesting male coping mechanism, I think. But you can tell how easy it is for women. In the case of this chick Jolene, she's decent looking and not exactly my type, but that's a above average woman by today's standards. You'll see land whales, single moms, tatted up, just weirdos, non-binary. They can pull off the same gimmicks because of the commodity they represent. So, yeah, I mean, let me know what you think about this whole dynamic and any stories you have of how women have really been able to cut above their weight despite having what you would think is they've hit the wall or they have too many bad aspects to their past.